Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another video on basic fiqh presentation. And in this video, we're talking about leadership in prayer. Leadership in prayer, that is imama, the act of being the imam of of a prayer, of a particular prayer. So we'll be talking about certain people that what other things to look at in people before you push them forward, or you make them the imam of the prayer, or what are the things that disqualifies a person from leading prayer. So these are the things we're talking about in this video. And we also talk about some other things like prostration of forgetfulness in the coming slides. So first is most appropriate for prayer, most appropriate for the leadership in the prayer. So that is when you have more than one person. So what are the things, what are the qualities you look at in people before you say, okay, this is the most appropriate for leadership in the prayer? So the first is you look at the best reciter, who is able to recite the Quran better, who has memorized the Quran better, who understands the Quran better. So you look at this. So and whoever is significantly better than the other, you give preference to him for leadership. So, but if there's no significant difference between them, you move to the next one, and that is the most knowledgeable. The most knowledgeable when it comes to the rulings of of Salah, the understanding of the rulings of Salah, and the knowledge of Islam generally, the fiqh of Salah, the fiqh generally, and knowledge of Islam generally. Look at this, and if you're not able to find any significant difference, you move to the next one, and that is the first to accept Islam. You look at them who accepted Islam first. So whoever accepted Islam first, be giving preference to. But if with this again, no significant difference, then you move to the next one, and that is the first to migrate. So the first to migrate, you try to see who was the first to migrate. But this does not really apply to us because we are not migrating from anywhere. So first to migrate, that is from Mecca to Medina. So you look at that, but that is not really applied to us. So we move to the next one, and that is the eldest, who is older between them. So whoever is older will be given preference. So, but if there's no significant difference in their age, and we don't want to be asking of their age, or and stuff like that. So there are some other things. So even though it is very rare that you look at this attribute and you don't find one above the other, it's very rare. So, but even if it happens like that, there are some other things a person's there are some other things to do that the scholars have highlighted. So one of them is to look at who the people of the congregation actually prefer. The people of the congregation, people that will be led, who do they prefer? Who do they prefer to lead them? So you look at this. If they prefer one person to lead them, and then you put forward that person, you give preference to that person. So these are things you do, even though it's very rare to get to this stage, but there are things that have been put in place to ensure that you have a leader in the you have a leader for the prayer. So, and even if this you are not able to get anyone above the other, there's still some other there's still some other things, like having to choose randomly, So and this is another uh is one of the things that the scholars have highlighted. When there's no way out again, then you might just choose randomly between them, and the person becomes the imam of the prayer. So the next thing we're talking about is who shouldn't lead. Who are those that shouldn't lead? And there are quite a number of people that shouldn't lead. uh First is a woman for men. A woman shouldn't lead for men. So a woman shouldn't lead for men. What this means is that a woman might lead for a fellow woman. So, but she shouldn't lead for men. So a woman shouldn't lead for men. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is an impure person. So when I say a woman shouldn't lead for men, if a woman decides to lead for a fellow woman, uh, there are little differences to the way the role will be aligned. So unlike the male, where the imam stands in front of the congregation, in front of the rows. So in the case of women, she will stay in between, stay together with the rest of the women on the same row. So, and the next is an impure person. An impure person shouldn't even lead at all, because one of the conditions for salah is purity. So an impure person shouldn't even lead at all. So whether from minor impurity, minor non-physical impurity, or major one. So or even if it is a physical impurity. So it shouldn't be laden. One that isn't able to recite Fatiha, and impurities, about impurities. I've talked about impurities, some videos back. So that's why I didn't bother to explain in details. We have talked about impurities. So if you have forgotten, you can please go back to the video. So one that isn't able to recite Fatiha, one that isn't able to recite Fatiha, because we said that Fatiha is one of the conditions, for is one of the arkan of Salah. It's one of the arkan of Salah, one of the actions that must be in the Salah. So uh, one that engages in shirk. So anybody that engages in shirk, as disbelief in Allah, and one of the conditions for Salah is Islam. For every act of worship, you must be a Muslim before that act of worship is considered correct. So with shirk, it is not considered correct, and the person shouldn't lead. So if a person claims to be a Muslim, but is committing shirk one way or the other, then he shouldn't lead. And even if he leads, you shouldn't pray behind him, because his prayer is not accepted. So with shirk, nothing is accepted unless you abandon that shirk and repent from it. So the next is one that is unable to stand, bow, prostrate, or sit for a fitter person. It's one that is unable to perform these actions, which happens to be part of the arkan of the salah. So a person that is unable to perform these actions shouldn't lead ahead of people that are better than him, that is in this that are able to exercise these positions. So if there's a person that is able to exercise this position, he should be given preference to. So provided he's able to lead, he fulfills the other conditions. I have to understand. So these are the people that shouldn't lead. So this is just summary about leadership, and we wouldn't be going. We won't be talking. We won't be going deeper than this. So this is just the little we'll be talking about leadership. So, and I hope it is understood. So prostration of forgetfulness, prostration of forgetfulness. Um, Prostration of forgetfulness is something that the person does whenever he makes a mistake on Salah. So, and that is why it's called prostration of forgetfulness. That is when he does something forgetfully on Salah, he does the prostration of forgetfulness to rectify that mistake. So, although it's not just prostration of forgetfulness, there are some other things to it, which I will explain very soon, inshallah. But one thing I want to point out here is that what we are talking about is prostration of forgetfulness, not if a person, the position of forgetfulness only applies to something a person does mistakenly or forgetfully. It does not apply to something a person does deliberately. So if a person deliberately adds something to Salah, something that is not part of the Salah, he deliberately adds it to Salah, he deliberately, adds one of the arkan, one of the, we know the meaning of arkan now, one of the compulsory acts, he deliberately adds it more than required, or he deliberately adds a raka more than required. So the person does not have to prostrate for forgetfulness. His Salah is totally nullified because he did it deliberately. So there's no point. So this prostration is only for forgetfulness, no other thing. So if a person he adds something or removes something deliberately, then his Salah is nullified. So aside the sunnah act, if a person deliberately abandons the sunnah act, there's no problem. So, but the compulsory acts, if a person deliberately, leaves them out, leaves any of them out, then his Salah is nullified. So, the procedure for forgetfulness only applies to something a person does mistakenly or forgetfully. So, we talk about when compulsory. When is this position of forgetfulness compulsory? There are certain times when it is compulsory. First is when a person adds legislated action more than required. Something that is legislated, if it does more than required, like adding a raka to Salah, he's supposed to perform 4 raka, but he's performing 5. So he does the position of forgetfulness. So, but before he does the position of forgetfulness, okay, in this case, it's just it's straightforward. So, but in a case where a person omits, okay, I think that is the next one, omitting a wajib. A person omits something that is compulsory, whether a wajib or or a ruknu or arkan. We remember that both ruknu and wajib, and both arkan and wajibat, both of them are compulsory. The only difference is that once a person leaves one mistakenly, his salah is not correct without it, and once a person leaves the other mistakenly, his salah is still correct without it. So if a person leaves a wajib as forgetfully, like the first tashahud in a salah that has two, like zuhr or asr, So if a person leaves the first tashahud, mistakenly, his salah is still valid without it. He will just do this sujood sah because it's part of the compulsory acts. So, but if a person leaves a ruknu deliberately, then mistakenly, sorry, then his salah is not yet complete unless that ruknu is brought back, and unless that ruknu is performed again in the salah. So that is only the only time the salah will be considered correct. So when a person omits a wajib or arkan, for instance, he omits the first tashahud, like I said, which is one of the wajib acts, one of the wajibat. So if a person omits it, what he will do in this case is to perform the position of forgetfulness compulsorily. It is compulsory for him to perform it. So, but in a case of arkan, omitting an arkan, like omitting a full raka, for instance, performing three instead of four. What you will do first of all is to perform that last raka. That last raka must be included. It must be included in that salah. So after it is included, only then do you go for your prostration of forgetfulness. That is the difference between arkan and wajib. So if a person leaves recitation of Fatiha, for instance, now that entire raka is nullified. So that entire raka is cancelled. So if he did it in the third raka, so and he has observed four, so that third raka is cancelled. So which means he's left with three, and he now have to bring one more to make it four. So after that four, he goes for the possession of forgetfulness. So that is how you perform the possession of forgetfulness. So and I forgot to mention, when it comes to possession of forgetfulness and every other, like I've been saying before, every other aspects of it, there are always differences of opinion. So there are scholars that wrote, that wrote specifically on this topic. There are scholars that wrote specifically on this topic, and I'm just giving us one opinion. So because as we continue now, we begin there are so many differences of opinion, and when we continue, I will mention some of them. So having doubt in numbers of rakas prayed. If a person is having doubt, has he prayed three or has he prayed four? Has he prayed two, or has he prayed three? Things like that. So he will go with the list, because if he's doubting between three and four, what is certain is that he has at least prayed three. So he will go with that list and make it four. So he will go with what is certain. What is certain is that he has prayed three. So we'll observe the last one and go for his position of forgetfulness. So when do you do this position of forgetfulness? And how do you do it? So we'll talk about it very soon. So the last thing is teslim before completion of salah. If a person does teslim before he completes the salah, instead of observing four rakah, he observed three and made it teslim. So and then it becomes compulsory on him. I've explained it before how we will go about it. Observe the fourth one and do his prostration of forgetfulness. So these are the times when it is compulsory. When is it sunnah? It is sunnah when saying the legislated statement in the wrong position. When the person says the legislated statement in the wrong position. So, like I said, there are differences of opinions regarding this, and there are more statements to it, more than this. There are more statements to it than this. So that is that. So method, how do you go about this position of forgetfulness? The first thing we should know is that this position of forgetfulness consists of two prostrations, like in Salah, after the last tashahhud, after the final, when after you have done all the rectification, like in the case when you miss a ruknu or an entire raka, you have completed the raka. Now it's time for you are sitting down for the final time now. So that is when you perform your position of forgetfulness. It could either be before the teslim or after the teslim. We'll talk about that very soon. So it consists of two prostrations, like in Salah, after the last tashahhud. So it can be before or after the teslim. So like I said, there are so many statements regarding this, and some say that a person performs the prostration of forgetfulness before. If a person omits something, then he does it before. If he adds something, he does it after the teslim. That is after saying assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So that is meaning of teslim. So there are differences of opinions regarding this. So some say that the basis is that he does it before teslim, except in one case. That is when he does teslim before completion of salah. What the last thing we mentioned under when compulsory. So if he does that, that's the only time he does uh, the position of forgetfulness after teslim. But to summarize it, the scholars say that this the only thing is the position of forgetfulness, whether before or after Taslim, it is, a matter of preference, not a matter of compulsion. A matter of preference that, it is preferable to do it after Taslim. It is preferable to do it before Taslim. So it's a matter of preference, not a matter of compulsion. So which means even if a person is meant to do it before Taslim and he does it after Taslim, it is still valid. It is still valid. So that is what will be, that is the only thing will be mentioned in here. So even if he does it before Tesla, it is okay, and even if he does it after Tesla, it is still okay for any of the things mentioned above. So this is all taken under prostration of forgetfulness. So lastly, I want to talk about the forbidden times for voluntary prayer. Although this is not one of the things mentioned in the when we outline the topics. So, but it's important that we know this as well. Forbidden times for voluntary prayers. Now we are talking about voluntary prayers, not a compulsory salat that a person, mistakenly abandoned. That is, if, for instance, a person slept off and then the time for that salat passed without him knowing. So he didn't deliberately sleep to pass the time, but he slept off and the time for that salah, elapsed. So what are the things? So in that case, he can observe his salah anytime he remembers. So even if it falls under this time, these periods that we mentioned now. So what are these periods? So some when it is broken down, there are five. So, but when it is, because those five are equivalent to three, we will be mentioning the three. Those five are equivalent to these three. So when it is broken down completely, there are five, but we will mentioning just three, which is just the summary of it. So after subh prayer till 20 minutes after sunrise, after subh prayer, not after the time for subh. So that is why prayer is highlighted after the prayer itself. It is the prayer itself, not the time. So after subh prayer till 20 minutes after sunrise. 20 minutes after sunrise, that is not necessarily 20 minutes after sunrise. This is not the first time we are saying this. We saw this when we were talking about Salah to Duha. This 20 minutes after sunrise is just like a description of, to make us understand what time we're talking about. If not, the 20 minutes was not described by the prophet. It was not mentioned as 20 minutes exactly. You understand? So, but, and again, it's not even exactly 20 minutes. It's just approximately, in fact, some say 15 minutes or 10 minutes after sunrise. So this is because it was described by the prophet. It was described by the prophet, and I don't want to go into the deep explanation of that. I couldn't find a pictorial, illustration to illustrate the way it is gotten. So, but just to make it simple for us, 20 minutes after sunrise, that's the simplest it can be. For maybe when we go further and learn better, then when we go more, when we learn advanced fiqh, then we understand what I'm trying to say. So after subhi prayer, say 20 minutes after sunrise, it is not allowed to perform any voluntary prayer within this period, unless somebody that abandons subhi, maybe mistakenly slept off. No, mistakenly, not deliberately, not in somebody that or somebody that slept off generally, has to perform his solar. So, but what I just want to emphasize is that a person should, do whatever he wants to do with the time and not take it lightly. So that is that. So the second time is when the sun reaches its highest before it slightly passes it. That is when the sun is directly above an object, when the shadow is very minimal that you can barely see it. So until it slightly moves away, that is in before Zur, the time before Zur. So when it slightly moves away and the shadow of that object begins to form, that is, you begins to become visible and you see it, you're able to see it. So that is when you what? That is when the time for Zur begins. So when the sun reaches at that point when it is at its highest, you don't observe solar at that time, and the scholar says it's not a very long time like that. So just few minutes. So and a person continues his solar afterwards. So the third time is after Asr prayer till complete sunset. So after Asr prayer, that is the prayer itself, not the time. So some think it is the time. It is not the time. The prayer after observing the prayer. So it is no. There is no voluntary prayer after it until the sun sets. So there are difference of opinion regarding the prostration or the solar you observe anytime you enter the mosque. Should the person observe it or not? So Allah Alam, there are difference of opinions, like I said, and I don't want to be going into that. I don't want to mention any of the opinion, as it is not the is not what concerns us the most now. So this is what we're stopping in this video, but Allah to make it beneficial for us and make it better understood than the way it was said. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.